Pause for Dean's selfie.
Or like,
Here we go.
I have nugget face.
within our personal, so like within the week.
Cameo and lead. Alright, so thanks for joining us this evening. For those of you, we do have some new faces this time, so it's awesome. It's always great to kind of see the changing, people that show up every time. It's great. By the way, we are almost at 400 people in the meetup from the whole area, so this is kind of exciting time to see that group that started a little over a year ago, so a little over a year ago, kind of has grown as other groups have, kind of combined together to help form this. But our goal here, so we're part of, if you haven't been to us before, quick intro, we're part of Product Tank RTP. If you're familiar with either Product Tanks or Mind the Product, based out of London, I think where they're based out of. We're an offshoot one of those. We're a local meetup group. It's myself, Dan, Econ, who's not here tonight. And we're kind of the current members help drive some of this. We help organize it. This is really all driven by our members. So it's really, for product people, by product people, product development, whether it be also, user experience, marketing, anything around the product area we want to bring together and just kind of have that conversation. So it started years ago. There's now, the crazy thing is like how much this group has grown in the last few years. So it's now over 150 cities, 50,000 members globally. So you're part of a larger product movement overall. And if you haven't checked it out yet, Mind the Product runs 2 conferences, maybe even more this year. They add a couple more. They have a conference coming up, the London, UK conferences, as well as a conference in San Francisco. Good time to kind of meet up with other product people as well. We're just here to share, learn. As we tell everybody who comes, like, you may come here for a talk, you see a talk, we invite you to come back again and give a talk. We're always open to whoever wants to share something, whatever your experience might be. Tonight's kind of cool because we're going outside of pure product. We've got David's going to talk about communication and managing communication, which is a skill set we all need because we work with different teams, so we have to manage that communication, but not something you normally hear around like a product type thing. So we've done talks on strategy, we've had experimentation talks, so it's open forum. The goal is to come together, just share some ideas, share some things. If you have a 30-minute talk, if you have a 20-minute talk, or like, I got a 5-minute idea for a talk, fantastic, let us know. We'll get you on a meetup and we'll go from there. We've got a couple more events. So we've gotten to a point now where we're pretty good about holding events monthly. This is what we call a content meetup. So we do those every other month. We also do kind of happy hour networking mixer events on the intermediate month. So every month there's something going on. It's going to be the 3rd Thursday of every month. So far, we've been doing that pretty well. We are looking at, in the next couple of months, these are saying evening events. We're looking at doing a morning meetup as well too, either for one of these or for a mixer. Gotten some feedback that mornings might be kind of a fun thing to try differently. We'll get it, people on the way into work, it might be easier to do. After work can be challenging. So, but those are the things we've got coming up. So you'll see them on meetup.com. We post them out there. If you want to speak to us, you can reach us through there as well, and we'll sign you up for a talk or whatever on the next groups. So, I want to thank our sponsors. I know we got some User Voice people around. You want to say anything tonight? Just 2 words of kind of.
Oh, yeah. Welcome, everyone.
This is Scott from User Voice. I'm putting him on the spot right now. So we want to do it fun. So we're driven, so it's totally all volunteer, and also our sponsors help us with either both the location, the food, AV as well. We record all of our talks and put those up on the website, which is changing unfortunately because of some of the technical glitches, but we'll work through those. But yeah, I want to thank Scott and User Voice for hosting us tonight. And then also Vaporware. Dan, you want to say a word?
Dan Moore, I'll be talking as well, but we are a product development organization, so we help startups and small medium businesses launch products. So we are customers of User Voice, so you should definitely use that.
And with that, we'll start the talks. And I think David, you're up first, so I'll let you guys walk through the exchange. I'll let you do the exchange, and then feel free to jump on in.
All right. Well, I am grateful for the opportunity. Thanks to Wes for allowing me to do this. And as soon as should be good to go. All right, I know you all sat in the back row, so either somebody warned you that it's dangerous to sit here in the front, or y'all are a bunch of back row Baptists. I'm not sure which one it is, but it's probably one of those two. So a little bit about me. I used to run operations for a custom software development shop in Holly Springs, and have spent much of my career as a project manager, working with product owners and product managers at lots of different places. So a lot of what I have to say tonight is general. If you put this into practice, your life will be better, and it'll probably be a little bit worse. It's going to be better because you're going to communicate better, and it'll be worse because you're going to be frustrated with how people communicate, right? So if I've done my job well tonight, you're going to have a little bit of that dissonance. And so this isn't a specific product management talk, and if I had more than 30 minutes, I'd get a little bit more into some of the weeds of that. This is going to go really fast. This is a 60-minute talk that I got in 30 minutes. So with that, it's all right if we just jump on in? All right, so the funny thing about this picture I love is how many of you have ever used a microphone? Okay, did you yell into it? Because it's a microphone, right? It's supposed to amplify your voice. So what we're going to talk about here is how to establish a connection so that you can be heard instead of just saying, stomping your foot, pounding the table, and doing all that kind of stuff. And as soon as this thing wakes up, there we go. All right, so here's the boring stats slide. Right? This is where everybody's eyes just kind of go back in their head. These are really important though. So a couple of Gallup surveys that have been done that talk about engagement of people at work. And since we're talking about product management, we're talking about people at work. There's 33% of people actually are engaged when they come to work. That's 1/3 of the people that you are working with are actually like, I'm ready to go. And 27% of people surveyed said, the feedback that I get doesn't really help me do my job any better. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, less than 20% of people say, hey, we communicate really well. What does that mean as product managers? Like if people aren't communicating and they're not feeling like they're getting open communication, what about talking to the engineering team? What about talking to the design team? Whatever. I'm not engaged, sure, whatever. Feedback, don't really get enough of that. Right? There's a cost to under-engage people. There's a cost to unalign people. And so the question is, what if this person is your stakeholder? The person who's chartered your project for you, the shareholders of the company that want you to actually deliver a product that is going to work. What if this person is your development lead? What if they're your designer? What if it's you? All right, so I'm going to hold that connection is essential for us to get results. We have to connect with people, and we can't connect with people that aren't engaged. My brother has got an MBA. He runs the PMO for NCR's IT, worldwide IT organization. He's like, you calm people, you think the solution to communication, the solution to every problem in business is communication. And I looked at him and I went, yeah, right? So if you don't believe me, let's just take a spin here. Who's ever seen a performance flying team? Really? You guys are so excited. Yes. You're all under-engaged. All right, so how many of you guys know how fast these guys fly? Anybody? Fast. Actually, super fast. 300 miles an hour? 500? Usually 600 miles an hour. And when they're doing that crazy cross, their closing speed, 1,600 miles an hour. Okay? How many of you know how close these guys fly to each other? How many? 18 inches. Okay, my dad's a retired chief master sergeant in the Air Force. That's why I couldn't put the Blue Angels up here. But they're all this, and they're flying. These guys are flying normal combat maneuvers. The only thing that's special is they got a really cool paint job. Okay, so let's pick this guy. What happens if he decides, I'm not going to be engaged for a couple minutes? Bad stuff. What happens if he decides he's not going to communicate? 18 inches at 600 miles an hour. Don't be this guy. Right? Bad stuff happens when we don't communicate with each other. We don't get, this is not the result they were looking for. These guys that are 100 feet below the deck, this is not the result they were hoping to see. Right? This is scary stuff. Right? So it's not just for airplane pilots. It's for all of us in the workplace. Why on earth is communication so difficult? You see this sign? It says what? Come on. It's pretty clear. How many people are beyond this point? They don't look concerned, do they? All right, so here's a question for you by show of hands. How many of you are communicators by trade? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I gotta raise my hand. 5. Like, that's my job. How many of you have been formally trained in communication? Of the 5 of you, how many of you have been to at least one class that was specifically designed to teach you how to communicate better? Okay. Wait, there were more hands that went up in that than there are communicators.
First question's tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky. It is supposed to be, right? Because we're all communicators. So, one of the things that's funny about this is communication is the skill that we use the most. It is, going back to my brother in business, right? You know, not everybody's in business. Some people are in social work. Some people are in whatever, right? But every single one of us communicates. And yet, so 1 or 2 other people said, hey, I've been to a class and specifically designed around communication. Every single one of us should raise our hand. And why is that? Well, it's because we're told that we need to really focus on hard skills, engineering, STEM, right? Those are the things that are teachable. They're easy to quantify. We learn them in a classroom. And by contrast, soft skills, those are the people skills. Those are the things, yeah, they're harder to prove. They're harder to learn. You can't sit in a classroom and learn them. Well, I have news for you. They are actually hard skills and they're difficult skills, right? They are actually trainable. They are actually things you can learn in the classroom. They are actually things that you can quantify. And so the point of this is that we all communicate. The point of this talk is not, hey, you're a terrible communicator, you need to be better. You might be, right? But the chances are good that you're a decent communicator, but you can be better, right? And so that's our goal. So if you think you're an amazing communicator, I want to do a simple exercise. Everybody with me to do a simple exercise? Sure. And the slower you are, the longer this talk takes. So, all right. So I'm going to put up a word, and I want you to get a picture in your mind. Don't say it out loud, but get a picture in your mind. All right. And then I'm going to go on to the next thing. All right. So cat. Everybody got a picture of a cat in your mind? Chances are pretty good. It looks like this, right? Little fuzzy thing, ears, right? Okay. How about an envelope? I'm going to make it a little harder. I'm going to be tricky. All right, how many of your envelopes look like this? Who knows what this kind of envelope is? No. No. This is an airmail envelope. Okay? All right, so now, what if I told you that the lady that I met a couple of months ago at the Internet Summit, when I did this exercise with her, this is what she thought of? Because she works for Caterpillar. What if I told you that my friend Karen, who's a certified FAA balloon pilot, thinks of this when I say the word envelope? Because the top half of the balloon is called an envelope. It envelops the warm air, and that's what causes the balloon to rise. So cat equals cat, envelope equals envelope, except when it doesn't, what gives? Right? Communication's difficult, see? We can't even talk about kitty cats and envelopes, right? Well, it's not always difficult if you know what you're doing. So how do we know what we're doing? All right, well, I told you before that people think that communication is not something you can learn in a classroom because it's really hard. I'm going to take you through comm theory in 90 seconds, maybe 120. And I have a degree in communications, so this is why this is really important to me. Communication theory breaks down into 2 basic parts. The first one is interpersonal communication. That's how we interact with each other. Those are the verbals, the things that we say. There are paralanguage things, which you might think is all of this hand-waving stuff, but it's actually not. It's inflection. It's the way you say what you say. And then there's the nonverbal things. Those are the hand-waving things. There's a couple of studies This guy, Albert Moravian, he posited that 7% of our communication is verbal. 38% of it is how we say what we have to say. And a whopping 53% of it is the things that we put along with it. And Michael Argyle said you have a 12 and a half times more effective communication when you put nonverbals in line with your verbals and your what I call extra verbals. So here's a demonstration. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? Right? I said the same exact thing. I just said it in a different way and with more dramatic things. Right now, you have a different experience based on that. So it's 12 and a half times more powerful. It might be even more than 12 and a half times more powerful. Like, you're not supposed to be here, right? So then we talk about organizational. And organizational is the side of things which is when we're structured in a company, right? Or we're in a religious organization, or we're in a social club, or whatever. There are internal and external norms around how we communicate. So when we talk about internal norms, we're like, hey, who's the boss? How do I relate to the boss? Right? What's the boss's expectations? What's the group's expectations? And what's the structure? What's the process? How do I interact with managers and peers and people that are below me? And then we have external stuff. So the organization, how does it represent itself to potential customers or to potential employees? And then there's this like murky middle ground where there's all kinds of other stuff. And they apply to both, like concepts of hearing and listening. What about my personal history? What kind of hierarchical structures are in place between me and you, specifically, whether I'm in an organization or whether I'm not. So we're not going to go through all of this. This is the overview. But the point is, this is a big field of study, and there's lots of opportunity to learn. We're going to go through three things. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about a model. And you may have heard of this model before, and you may not have. And this is the underlying model of all human communications. All right, so there's you and somebody else, right, at its most basic level. And you have this thing that you need somebody to understand. And you've got to make sure that they either understand it or they do what you need them to do. So what do? You encode the message. We use words. We may use text. We may send an email. And they decode it. And then they say something back to you. And the question is the message that you sent the same as the message that you got back? And the only time you've ever really communicated is when they match. Message sent equals message received, right? You're like, right? Well, what happens when communication fails? So you do your encoding thing, you've got this message, you send it off, and then there's interference. What's some examples of interference that you can think of? Kid, yeah, right? Distractions. Word choice. All sorts of things, right? So there's something in between you and somebody else that gets in the way. And what happens is, they say something back to you. Does anybody see anything different here? Come on. You see it, don't you? Don't be afraid. Spit it out. What's different? One's a dotted line. So the question is, does message sent equal the message received? It does not. Whose fault is it? Whose responsibility is it? It's you, the sender. You are responsible for detecting interference, always. Why is that? You care? You're the only one that can? You initiated the message, right? Nobody but you knows what you meant to say. It's not somebody else's fault. Okay, cool. What if you did all the things right? You had the right word choice. No kid screamed, right? And the interference is on the other side. Is the message sent the same? No, it's not. Whose fault is it? You. Doesn't matter whose fault it is. Whose responsibility is it? Yours, the sender. Because the interference happened between you. It's still your responsibility. This is like one of the most famous places people fail in communications. Is they think, that's just so stupid. I didn't listen. Or, right? Instead of persisting. And so when we say, hey, okay, I've detected that my communication didn't make it through, we re-encode. Send it again. they decode, and off we go. And of course, I double click. So the question then is, how often do we go through this? Constantly. Much is required.
There has to be a limit though.
Till we get tired and we say, I'm out, right? Right? And this is one of the things that contributes to trust. How many of you would want to walk across this bridge? I'm sure there's somebody out here that's adventurous, but generally speaking, now, would you want to cross this bridge at flood stage underneath? I don't want to go across this bridge to begin with, right? And the question is, how do we trust each other? So I have a friend named Richard Fagerland, and he wrote a book called Trustology. And in it, his whole core premise is that trust is made up of three things: integrity, compassion, and competence, right? The trust stool has three legs. And so if we're lacking any one of those three things, then we don't trust each other. And a lot of us just have a word for trust, and we're like, I don't trust you. Well, what does that mean? Sometimes we don't trust each other because we fail to acknowledge the role of interference in the way we communicate with people. I conclude that you don't care. I conclude that you're ignorant. I conclude that you lack integrity, right? The reality is that none of those may be the case. It may just be that we're failing to communicate. All right, so I promised you that we were going to walk through a couple of comm theory concepts, and these are the three that I want to highlight. I want to make sure that we all have a shared understanding, because we all know in product management, shared understanding is gold, right? We're gonna write some epics and some stories, and we're not going to put acceptance criteria on them, right? And we don't put acceptance criteria on them. How is it possible that we have a shared understanding, right? Because we always need to have shared understanding. We're always going to put acceptance criteria, right? It would be ridiculous to not do that. So I want to make sure we have a shared understanding, just like we would in the day-to-day of making sure that our teams understand what we're building. Then we're going to talk about the role of frame of reference and personality. All right, so what's the difference between hearing and listening? Hearing is something you do with your ear, right? If you take this H off, what do you get? So a lot of people get this confused, right? They're like, I want to be heard. Cool, great. I hear your lips and they're flapping, right? Kind of what you guys are doing to me right now, right? This is an auditory response. Your ear is between the speaker and your brain, right? Hearing is between it. Versus listening, which is to give your attention to something, right? It's a cognitive experience, okay? So if you need help remembering this, I brought my friends along, right? Hear no evil, right? And this guy, hey, you know, he's enjoying the music, right? So understand the difference between hearing and listening. It's important. Remember, we all communicate and we can all improve. I want to tell you a story. How many of you guys know about Hamlet? Shakespeare fans? Hey, there's more here than there were in the last time I gave this thing. So in Act 3, Scene 1, Hamlet is worried about what he's going to do about the death of his dad. Is he going to avenge his father's death, or is he not? And he ponders the question of, like, is it better to stay alive and avenge my father's death, or just give it up, off myself, which, by the way, I don't recommend. It's Shakespeare's fault, not mine. And perhaps go into that dream state of the sleep of death and maybe have wonderful dreams. I don't know. He ultimately decides that he's going to stick around. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because there's a lure of information, right? This worked itself out in real life with me. I'm having a conversation with a lady at a training event. We're in between sessions, having a great conversation with her. And then all of a sudden, it happens. I stopped talking. She just kept giving me her, keep going. And then she realized I wasn't saying anything. She said, oh, go ahead, I'm listening. And I said, what was the last thing you heard me say? What do you think she said? No, she wouldn't give me that. That would have been stand up for her. She told me the last thing she heard me say, and I said, you know what, that was the last thing I said before you pulled your phone. Right? So it seems to me that the question is not to be or not to be, but it's to listen or not to listen. The phone was interference. We weren't communicating anymore. I was talking, and she was hearing me, but she was not. She was not what? This is the talking communications, guys. All right, so I want you to make a Shakespearean commitment to listen. To listen or not to listen every time. And I use the phone here. It's not about the phone, although increasingly it actually is. In an iteration meeting or a planning meeting. And what are people doing? I hear you. Good, I'm glad you're here and you're not listening, right? So, and you guys, you lead the chart, you lead by example, right? So make a Shakespearean commitment to listen. Okay, frame of reference. This is a quote from a book that I highly recommend. It's by Steve Zaffron. It's called The 3 Laws of Performance. This is the first law, that people will act according to their view of the world. Also known as perception is reality, Dave. I worked for a guy named Dave. I know it's funny, Dave and Dave, my brother Dave. You guys know about Dave and Dave? No? Wow, I must be really old. Okay, so I worked for this guy, Dave, and the very first thing that he said to me was, perception is reality, Dave. And I said, no, Dave. Reality is reality. Your perception doesn't make it real. So that causes me to ask myself the question, what lens is somebody looking through? If I take my glasses off and I hand them to Jody and I say, could you look through my glasses for a second? What do you think is going to happen to her eyes? She's not going to be able to see anything. And you know what? Without my glasses, you all are just really blurry. And so the question is not, how do I see the world? But the question is, how does somebody else see the world? And each one of us sees the world in a particular way. And what does that do to us in the communication model? We're already talking about our ability to encode and decode and interference. Well, what happens is, every time we have to say something, we have to work through this frame of reference. The sum total of everything that we've had is our experience. And guess what? The person that we're talking to, they got a screen too. So not only do we have to figure out how to encode what we have to say, choose the right words, we have to actually get through our own screen, and then we got to get through whatever environmental interference there is, and then through their screen, and they have to decode it, and then they got to send it all back to us again. Right? And remember, real communication happens when what? Message sent equals message received, right? So here's a good example of this. Let's say that I am the director of product and I am just full of all kinds of great ideas from my users. And I'm prioritizing them and I bring them to the VP. And I say, here's my roadmap. This is, I'm putting my badge on the table, I can sell all this stuff. I know this is what our customers want. And they're like, no, I just took this job 6 months ago, okay, and I'm just ready to go. And he says, no. And my first response is, why are you always pushing me down? Right? Well, why did I respond that way? Oh, because the job I just left, I left because I could never get the most solid business case through. And guess what I brought with me to the new one? I brought this nasty screen, right, that I got to work through. And the VP's like, whoa, hey, whoa, where's this going? I just wanted to ask you some questions about the numbers. Oh, okay. Right, so I got to work through my screen. What's this a picture of? No, it's not a picture of screen. What's on the other side?
We don't know.
No. So here's the cool thing about screens, right? This is actually a picture out my window, and I did play a little trick because you know how hard it is to take a picture of a screen? It's actually really hard. This is a picture of the bird feeder outside my window. Now, this isn't a great picture. It's kind of fuzzy and the white balance and contrast and all that stuff's not real great. It's not crisp, right? Why is that? The screen. You're never going to get rid of the screen. But if you learn how to look through the screen, you'll actually see enough of the picture that you're going to be able to be effective. Right? So just because you got a screen is not necessarily a bad thing. All right, so let's talk about personality. We'll talk about screens. When we talk about personality, it's important to turn the camera on ourselves. We're going to take a picture of who we are at this time. It doesn't mean it's forever. You're not doomed to be who you are. Like if you're a communicator and you're not happy with how you're communicating, whatever, it's not a permanent thing, it's a snapshot, it's a point in time. But we do have to be willing to turn the camera on ourselves. All right, so how do we figure out our personality? There's lots and lots of ways to figure it out. There's a bunch of tools out there. If you Google personality test, you're going to come up with the proverbial 322 million search results. Not all of those are personality tests, but you know, like you can spend your whole life working on these things and never really actually know. I'm gonna give you an example from one of these, and it's the one that I actually like the most. It's a tool from Wiley called RTP. And full disclosure, I'm an authorized business partner. I have to say that. I want you to think about this because it's a really simple and easy way for you to kind of think about your preferences and tendencies and the way that other people have their own preferences and tendencies. And because you know that, you're able to effectively understand the role of personality and connect with them in a different way. And we said connection is essential for what? Remember, results. Can't get results if we're not connected with each other, if we're not communicating. So DISC is a simple but not simplistic way to understand these things. How many of you would say you're fast-paced and outspoken? Usually people are like, that's me! Right? But okay, I'll take a couple of them. How many are cautious and reflective? Well, you're either one or the other, right? Okay, how many of you would say that you're questioning and skeptical? This isn't a bad thing, right? How many of you would say you're warm and accepting? Okay, cool. So, yes, you can. But generally, you're going to fall on one side or the other, right? All right, so everybody should have raised their hand at least twice. And if you didn't know, maybe we got to talk about something else. But when you start laying these two axes together, you start being able to see a couple of patterns that emerge. So people that are questioning and skeptical and fast-paced and outspoken, the number one thing they care about is let's get her done, right? People that are fast-paced and outspoken, but they're warm and accepting, are like, hey, let's all get together. Come on, let's get together. It's going to be great. We're going to love it. People that are warm and accepting and cautious and reflective, they're like, hey, we just want to make sure everybody's happy. We're all getting along. It's going to be great, but you know, we don't want anybody to rock the boat. And then people are questioning and skeptical and cautious and reflective. They're like, hey, we got to get it right. This is me. I'm in the details. We're super conscientious and whatever, right? So we all kind of have a tendency towards one of these. If we were doing a more interactive workshop, we'd be walking around the room and doing all kinds of fun stuff, but we're not. So these we call Ds. They are, you know, like, and let me go back to this for a second. We're all of these, right? Every one of us has some piece of all of these. So it's not like, hey, this is better and that one's worse, and oh, you're this and I'm that. That's not the point. The point is, where are we most comfortable, right? So I happen to be most comfortable down here and get it right. Right, so D's focus on dominance, I's focus on influence, S focus on stability, and C's focus on conscientiousness, right? So these are the things that make up the DISC model. Super easy to remember. Now, wouldn't it be great if we're in a meeting and we knew what everybody really wanted? And if we all had a sign, right? Like, these are the things we care about. Well, the good news is that we actually do get that. So we get back to this model and we ask ourselves the question, what are the kinds of things that people who want to get it done say? Any ideas? Get it done is one. Yeah, well, what's the point? Why are we here? Why can't we just decide? Let's go, right? People who want to get together, like, hey, who's invited? Who's going to be there? I want to make sure nobody's left out. Hey, how's everybody doing? Right? And why are we here? Like, we got to get this right, right? So the thing that is the sign, the big sign, is how do people talk? How do people engage? Which of these questions represents the way you're most comfortable? And then if you look at the people that you work with, what are they most comfortable with? So for me, if I end up in a room full of people who are get it done people, and I'm like, listen, I'm an ops guy. Like, you're going to go to jail if you do that. I don't care if I'm going to jail. I just want to get it done. Yeah, what's the probability that I'm going to go to jail is pretty low, right? Now I'm starting to feel like I'm pressed down, like nobody wants to listen to me, nobody cares. And guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to disengage. I'm not going to communicate, right? So it's worthwhile for us to be paying attention to what everybody's saying. And what are we doing when we do that? We're listening, right? We're not just hearing. So when we do that and we make adjustments to how we communicate with people, we are working with them according to what we call the platinum rule, right? So you know what the golden rule is, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if I'm a C, I want you to give me all of the details. So I'm going to give you all the details because that's what I want you to do for me. Right? The platinum rule is a version of that. It's let's treat other people the way they need to be treated, which in the end is how I want to be treated, right? So treating people the way they want to be treated. Does anybody know the backstory behind this picture? No? Okay, so this Braves game, I think it was last year. I'm not a huge sports fan, but I heard about this and I went and dug it up. You can see that the game's in progress, and we know from the umbrella that it's what? Raining. It's raining. This ROTC officer is standing at attention at the POW/MIA memorial in the stadium, and this dude paid a whole lot of money to watch this baseball game. Is he watching it? Why is he watching it? To get his picture taken. Absolutely. No, why isn't he watching it? He's not watching it because this guy is not allowed to stand there with an umbrella. He has to stand there rain or shine. And he's going to stand there. He's going to do his job. But, you know, he's probably cold and wet. This guy says, I'm going to treat you the way you need to be treated. And you know what? He's not, do you notice this? He's not doing this. He's not watching the game. He's adopted the same posture as the guy he's serving. Right? He's treating that guy the way he needs to be treated. And nobody's going to ask you to stand in the rain with an umbrella and not watch the game you paid $50 to see and skip the hot dog and the beer, right? Nobody's going to ask you to do that. But what we are asking you to do is know who you are and treat other people the way they need to be treated. So this is a really important picture, and you guys all understand it, right? What? Oh, so I'll agree to you. Yeah, right. I'm just waiting for somebody to say it. I got a problem here, don't I? I got some interference here, right? This is a quote that I love from Socrates: "The unexamined life is not worth living." I have it on good authority that Socrates is an idiot, because the overexamined life is also not worth living. So what I'm asking you to do is spend time looking at yourself, but not too much time, right? I want you to know who you are, why you do what you do. Because what I want you to do is I want you to abandon the old way of doing things. We can't talk to each other through a tin can and a rope. We got to do things a different way to get a different result. So this applies to sort of one-on-one interactions. This is, hey, I'm in a meeting, and I need to make sure that the point's getting across, right? I love this picture for a couple of reasons. This lady's like, she's really intense. Look at this lady right here. You know what she's saying about it? This guy's like, hey, what? Say what? Right? And this lady, she's doing the same thing over here. So we got to get the point across. How do we get the point across? Right? You're presenting, you're leading, you're trying to help people think in a different way. All of these concepts apply in all of these cases. Whether you're a product manager, whether you're an executive, whether you're an engineer, developer, whether you're a support person, it doesn't matter. These things change your life. So, all right. So, how do we walk out of this here? What are the key takeaways? First of all, it's always the sender's responsibility to make sure the message sent equals the message received. Right? I think we beat that. Probably did that. The difference between hearing and listening. Which one's the cognitive process? What? I couldn't hear you. Sorry. Frame of reference. All of the things that go into who we are and how we operate, how we hear, how we encode, how we give messages. What are our preferences and tendencies, and how do they impact other people? And then the platform, right? It's do unto others as they need to be done. And that's really it. These are the 5 things that if you walk away from this talk and you do these things, you'll have a demonstrably different result in connection and getting the results that you're looking for. So with that, I'm going to ask you if you have any questions or feedback. I know we don't have a ton of time, so if
You're running a question, yeah.
what do you think? Stupidest thing you've ever heard? It's okay. Tell me that. I can take it. I'm a big guy.
I do have a question. How do you practice this or return to this script?
Well, for me, there's a couple of things. I remember I told you about my brother. That he told me that 25 years ago, actually 27 years ago, right? This has been a part of who I am. It's an unconscious competence for me. Although it drives me crazy because just even last week I told my wife, I'm like, I don't get it. I'm supposed to be some expert at communications, and you and I, we're not communicating, right? So it's a constant reflection. It's always turning the camera on myself and asking myself the question, why am I doing this? Is this the way you need to be treated? And for my wife, you know, it's like, look, I'm going to tell her this because I'm going to feel good after I'm done telling her. And anybody got a significant other? That's always a smart thing to do, right? So you got to turn the lens at yourself on a regular basis. Always be examining yourself.
But not too much.
But not too much, right? Because you don't want to be like Socrates and be an idiot.
So I have a different background, so I'm in HR, I know, right? And while working with strong teams at Fidelity, a similar question was oftentimes posed to me. And my suggestion was ask why 5 times. But not like a 2-year-old, like, well, why, right? But really layer the question or form the question that will elicit the information that you need to see that person, you know, through the screen rather than the screen. And it's hard. And I suggest you practice it in a safe spot, like with a spouse or whatnot, if that's safe.
Sometimes that's not safe.
But a lot of them were able to, stories weren't sliding anymore, infinite spreads. They were able to go to market without having some hiccups, because there were some, and those hiccups were becoming fewer, right? Because they were understanding each other through those layering of the 5 questions. And you get to a point where you don't have to layer it 5 times, right? But that initial effort, everyone's like, I did not realize who really was on the team, which is a talent understanding, right? And a skill set understanding that they didn't get. But it didn't happen in like one PI period, right? It happened over a course of about 6 months.
I'm going to yes and that, right? Because that's absolutely true. One of the dangers that you can get into with the word why is it's really confrontational. So if you set it up the way Jody's talking about, which is, hey, let's do a little 5 why stuff on this. It's not, why did you do that? What do you mean, why did I do that? I'm going to show you who's boss, right? Because the screens, right? The screens are always at work, but if you set the context around, hey, we're going to take this apart, and one of the ways we do this is with 5 whys, it's tremendously successful. Do you ever know?
Well, only a little bit. I was going to say, you know, you mentioned the whole screen and the behaviors. I was going to different thread there about the DIS. If anybody's ever done like the DIS profiling, what it's called, it's actually pretty enlightening because I kind of recognized before you even got there, so I kind of did. I will say that having gone through that training, I took it myself and took a training class around it. Understanding the whole point of that is actually to get to tailor like to the point of the platinum rule, like how do they need to be talked to, or how do they need to how do you need to say things so they can hear it? It's interesting because once you begin to reference, and you can actually do this pretty quickly, is like, do I know this person to be more extroverted or introverted, more quiet or loud? They focus more on people or on data. You can kind of get a rough idea of how they think about the world, how they view, and then it's easier to communicate with them, actually, because we all know that stereotypically developers are more introverted and data focused, right? So it's easier to say, okay, great, let me show you the data. I was asking us PMs, where's the data? How do I know what I'm doing to be valuable and prove that out to me? Versus, you know, sales is the utmost high I, right? Which is the extroverted.
Trust me, it's going to be great.
Yeah, they're all about that aspect of it. So, you know, even in our relationships with inside of work, we'll see how people behave differently. And so just that little bit can facilitate a lot of communication because sales guys do want to get hyped up. If you're down here saying, you know, being super quiet and all that, they're like, I don't care. Tell me how great it's going to be, right? They want that side of the information versus the data-driven stuff sometimes.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. just give me a second here, and is that I actually have a couple of postcards that if you're interested in DISC or you're interested in maybe bringing DISC to your team, it's great for teams. I actually have postcards. If you give me your business card, I'll trade you a business card for a postcard. It's a free profile assessment. And the reason I asked you for the card, they don't last for a long time. So if you end up like missing the window or whatever, you gotta let me know, kind of thing. But I'm happy to give those to you. I think I have like 15 of them. So if you're interested, let me know.
Yeah, would you use this for C-level conversations, or is this more for peer-to-peer working, daily working groups? My experience, C-level tends to be, there's a certain format that they expect of you,
Sure.
And you're not as worried about their feelings, for want of a better word.
Yep. So I told you before I was a management consultant, right? So if you ask any consultant an or question, what answer are you going to get? Yes. Yes, I would use this with C-level people, right? And the reason for that is because the leaders of the organization set the tone at the top. We hear that all the time, right? If you as a leader say, I really could care less about the data, I just want to know, is everybody going to be included, right? Well, that's a lopsided leadership model, right? And what we're looking for is a well-rounded team. Right, so we do DISC in teams, we do them in leadership teams. One of the great ways to do this is to start it out in the leadership team and see how it goes and have the leaders be like, oh, wow, we did this at a company that I worked for. We had 5 people on the leadership team. We had 3 C's, 1 B, and 1 guy that's kind of hovering on the SC line. We didn't have anybody in the I quadrant. What do you think that told us as a bunch of leaders? Wow. We got this lopsided wheel. We got to figure out how are we gonna handle this so that we can be balanced and lead this company in the way we got people in our team that are I people, and they can't relate to us as a leadership team. So you can see how starting there as sort of and a lot of times it just manifests itself in the leadership team's frustrated. Why are we getting the results that we're looking for? Okay, well, let's take that apart. There could be lots of reasons for that. So the answer is yes, we do it, but we do it in a slightly different way with the leadership team than we would with the regular staff. I don't know how much time we've got, so.
Do this one on one part.
Okay.
I work with a fully distributed team, so we're all remote. And you mentioned that over 50% of communication is hypothesized to be nonverbal. What do you recommend for increasing communication effectiveness in a completely distributed team?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's a challenge of modern remote-enabled workforces, right? I will not take credit for this. This came from Caleb Woods, the CTO at Role Model Software up in Holly Springs. He really challenged us a while ago with taking a remote-first orientation to what we did. Right? So we're going to assume that people are all remote. So guess what? When we're having a conversation, your webcam's on, and you're looking at it. You're not doing this thing over here, right? We're eyeball to eyeball. Just because we're through a screen share, who cares? We're eyeball to eyeball. We're in a team meeting, right? And sometimes this is an investment in technology. It's you're not going to do this on your $40 a month Time Warner cable thing, crummy internet connection where you're getting, 2 megabits, right? It's just not going to work. You got to invest in the tools of your craft so that, hey, we got the free Zoom account. We can't put more than 8 faces on the screen, and we got 12 people. Who's going to be the lucky few to get left off? No, I'm sorry. It's not okay. We've got to invest in the infrastructure so that we are able to see that. Because guess what? When people are sitting there in the meeting, they're going like this! And you can't see it because their webcam's not on. And you don't know that they're doing it. So putting yourself into a place where you have the infrastructure and the expectation. Hey guys, we're starting a meeting and 3 of you don't have your webcams on. We're not starting until you turn them on. By the way, please go put some appropriate attire on before you do that, but we'll wait.
Just to add to that, what we found very useful is those one-time-a-year events where you get together physically. They're crucial because the webcam is great, but if you haven't built up that personal relationship first, at drinking event or whatever the hell it is.
Yeah.
Once you have that, you go to webcam. It's like
Totally.
if you know their personality, you've talked to them already. You establish a relationship. It becomes so much easier.
And I would also posit from more than almost a decade and a half of working with remote teams, almost exclusively, with the exception of 3 years, that once a year is not enough. If you're going to commit to a fully distributed and remote team, you got to find a way to get people there at least quarterly. We have one at Role Model. We have everybody in this every 6 weeks. You have to be there at some point every 6 weeks. And it's just a commitment that you make to having a distributed team. And you're not going to hold to that like maniacally, right? But it's a key element because connection is essential for what? For results, right? We got to be connected. We got to know that we're humans. We got to know each other's personalities, preferences, and tendencies. And you can't always find that out.
And have that physical connectedness, you'll then understand the written communication better. Because you'll understand that person better. So I'm very direct, and I coached for 20 years. So I'm going to tell you how it is. If you don't like it, I'll help you get through it. But this is what's going to happen.
Okay, pause that.
Right?
Let's ask the question. Where do you think she falls? Come on. Have you done this?
Oh, yes, I have.
And are you a dean?
No.
No?
I am.
I actually would say that you're a DI based on what I know, right? And it's not because hey, she's a dean. We gotta be.
But people know that I also have humor and I love to laugh and I like people to be successful. So they're like, Jody's being Jody, but we need to perform.
Because we're an amalgam of all four. Every one of us is all four. It's just we have one preference. All right, one more question, or one more. He's like, oh man, I scratched my eye. It's like being at an auction. Yeah.
How do you work towards everyone understanding? Because it's not just the slipper bag, it's also the sealers. But how do you work towards everyone understanding that one of those things, whether it's disc or anything, isn't a better way to be in a certain company to understand? Like, we need people who are really analytical. We need those engineers who are data. We need the salespeople. The engineers need the salespeople who are positive all the time and actually sell things, because engineers sure as hell can't, right? Because we're going to question everything that we build,
Right.
and all the other aspects of it. How do you foster that sort of thing?
So there's three things, right? The first thing is, I've always said this, and I believe it fundamentally to be true. You've heard the saying, it takes all kinds to make the world go round, right? You've heard that saying?
Yes.
Well, it don't take all kinds, we just got them, right? They're just, all kinds are just here. The second thing is, my daughter has a bicycle, and she's missing a spoke on it. One spoke on the front wheel. You know what happened to the front wheel? It got all warped. And pretty soon it didn't work anymore. Because that one spoke, believe it or not, there's like 50 spokes on the wheel. And you're like, well, it's one big deal. Clip, it's gone, done, no big deal, right? Look, see, it's going fine. It's not getting stuck in the fork, right? So off she goes. And then she's like, hey, Dad, can you fix my bike? What's wrong with the bike? And she's like, the front wheel won't turn anymore. What do you mean the front wheel won't turn? One spoke out of whack caused all the rest of the tension on the thing to warp the wheel enough that it wouldn't go through the brake calibrator. So what I did was spend 20 minutes. I got all the other bikes on the back of the car. I'm in there, we're trying to like turn it this way, no, not that, turn that way. And then you go to the other side of the wheel and you turn it the wrong way, now the wheel's even worse. Right, so the point is that we got to foster a culture. This is the third thing. And this is why I talk about tone at the top. We got to foster a culture that values all four. Because when we have all four, the wheel turns smoothly. And it's not okay for us to say, we're the engineers, and we're the marketing people, we're the salespeople. Where's Dave? Dave and I were just talking about this before we started. You know, like, the silos don't work, and they can't be allowed to work. And that's part of the big challenge is, look, those people over there, they're just the detail people. Okay, like, hey, tell me about the details that matter to you. What do you mean tell me about the details? You guys never come and ask me about the details. Now I feel valued, and guess what? I'm starting to be engaged again. Right, so we foster a culture where we care about the unique differences of everybody in the all go around. I don't know if that helps answer answer the question. If there's more, I'm happy to talk more about it, but I gotta turn the floor over because poor Dan's over there being like,
Thank you, Dave.
what about me? All right.
And I've been getting into product management and have been doing product management for the past 5 years or so. And so instead of a model or any kind of thoughts, these are just a few collections of ideas and techniques that have worked for me.
And they're good techniques. Don't feel like you have to bother to do your own background communications.
So yeah, a little bit about me. I founded a company called Vaporware. We're one of the sponsors for the event. We're essentially a product development team for hire. We're about 5 people now, product managers, designers, and developers. We work mainly with startups, so people on extremely low budgets, but recently we've been working with a lot of small, medium businesses as well, so helping them get to the next stage because they have some kind of blocker. Always with founders and C-level teams, though, so some of the questions about building that culture, that top-down voice and perspective, rings very true for some of these. So, the very first thing, and like the core thing that comes to my mind in communication was this time where I was an internal employee at 2 companies ago, and I was young, stupid, and communicated incredibly poorly. And so one thing that I've learned over these past few years is that everyone is your customer, everyone's your client. So no matter if they're an internal developer, as a product manager, you need to talk to everyone like you are collecting money from them in some way. It's essentially this perspective of everyone deserves the same respect and authority that you would give to your boss or the C-level person in your company, but at every single level. So it deals with just the professionalism that you use, how talk calmly and professionally with them, as well as the authority aspect. So as product managers, leading without authority, leading through influence, how do you influence people and friends, all that kind of good stuff, comes from the same concept. Is how to treat everyone as a client. The next thing, so down here at the bottom, I've kind of laid out the 5 general areas and stages of product development that product managers are involved in. A lot of our time is spent in this build phase, so defining exactly what we want to build, actually doing the design and development of that. But product management work starts way before that begins, where the ideas come from, where the insights come from user voice and other tools like that, to prioritizing those ideas, making sure, validating that those are the right ideas in a discovery type phase, as well as reviewing them after we launch and measure them. So, one practice that we use a lot with startups is this idea of 10x thinking. So instead of thinking how we're going to increase revenue 10%, it's how are we going to multiply, how are we going to scale revenue to be 10 times what it currently is. And so this idea of thinking big is really important during the ideation stage. I think Google pioneers or uses this a lot and challenges their product managers to do this. But it's essentially, when you have all the freedom in the world and you're not thinking about constraints, that's the time for big ideas. It's a very powerful exercise that you can do. It doesn't have to be dollar related, so it could be efficiency, it could be communication based. How do we communicate better? How do we work as a team better? How can we become more productive? So your metrics for that can be all over the place. How many of you have seen Ratatouille? Movie? Okay, cool. That's good. So this comes from that. One of the things in the book, or in the movie, was a book that was written by one of the chefs of a cook. Anyone can cook, so a cook can come from anywhere, is essentially what he means. And there's this struggle during the movie of, well, can anyone really be a cook? Like, what if you burn water? Is that possible? So, taking that idea and thinking about it in terms of where do ideas come from, and do we take ideas directly from customers? Do we take them just from the CEOs and that kind of stuff? It's that anyone can contribute ideas, anyone can bring it in. Working with startups,
titles don't matter at startups. I've dealt with so many CEOs that have not a single dollar to their name, and it's essentially just the ideas themselves are the value, and the execution of the ideas are the value. So these ideas can come from anywhere. Later on in the process, like when you're reviewing code, the same is true for your support teams or different levels of customers or different segments of customers. As ideas can really come from anywhere. They can come from people that aren't even your customers, that are prospects or leads in your sales pipeline, or leads that you lose. So a lot of what I have here is a lot of the sales work that I've done and that I've learned over the past 5 years. So from the sales perspective, the idea is that when you receive a no, or even when you receive a yes, that holds some very, very good ideas for your product, for the service, or whatever it is you're selling. So, working with startups again, and how we prioritize ideas. Traditionally, back 2 jobs ago, when I just told people no and was very crass with my terminology, I've learned the technique to say not now. It's essentially no, but it's less finite and less harsh. So going back to some of Dave's points is specifically the terminology that we use. Some other techniques that we've found in this. How many of you have heard of like a back burner or use a back burner? Okay. Or an icebox, similar type of concept. In enterprise, I've heard parking lot. I'm like, that's a parking lot. I'm like, does that mean you go fight in a parking lot? Like, what does that mean? But it's essentially just saying, not now. Let's focus on this. Like curating your backlog. We still believe in writing everything down and having a backlog, having a back burner to some extent, because not throwing away that idea, but just having it somewhere else allows people to pull back in and focus and say, hey, I've been heard, I've been listened to, I guess is the right terminology, but it's just not our focus right now. So this is a really good prioritization technique that we found specifically with startups. Even more abrasive than that, so we built a tool called definemymvp.com. At one point, it started with the simple idea of if someone comes to us with 20 ideas, like where do we even start with them? And so we just asked 3 questions around the RICE methodology, which stands for reach, multiplied by impact, multiplied by confidence, and divided by effort. And so it's basically saying, can you ask a question of something that matters and cut that list in half? So you prioritize it in some way, just cut it in half and you just toss the bottom half of it. Just say, like, not now, there's not enough time in the day, we're trying to get down to one thing. And so, specifically around MVPs and getting to market, we found this to be an extremely useful technique to help you say not now on everything besides just the first 2 pieces of that. You can also use this for a single problem. So if you have a problem that you're trying to solve to a bunch of customers, segment your customers, trying to prioritize them. Even if you're a startup, if you only have 10 specific customers, cut that customer list in half and focus on 10, or focus on the first 5 first. So this also brought the idea to mind of what one thing can we do right now to be effective. So just this concept of focus and priority really strives with this. So 5 whys. It's great. So we use this all the time. Recently, I've actually run into issues
And
where...
you look like I gave you a good golden nugget.
Recently, though, I ran into this issue. You validated it before I even said anything, so it's great.
Okay.
But how you say why is incredibly important too. So I didn't really get into that. But essentially, it's the idea of root cause analysis. So during the discovery phase, after you prioritize and said this is most important, we want to make sure we're really hitting the right problem. Why is that a problem? Like, did they mean something else? And then during the review phase as well is incredibly important. There's this story of Toyota getting a customer support request saying, my car doesn't like chocolate ice cream. Has anyone heard this story? Awesome. I love telling the story. So, I saw it on someone's wall at some point. It was from like the old bulletin board days or something like that. But this guy who had a Camry took his car to the grocery store, and every time he picked up chocolate ice cream, his car would not start. But every time he picked up vanilla ice cream, his car would start fine and he'd go home. But that's the only thing that he could get to reproduce this problem. And support turned him down all the time. Like, they were like, this guy's nuts, like, just forget about him. And eventually he pestered them enough, or it got up the chain somehow, that they sent an engineer out. And it turns out that the chocolate ice cream was at the back of the grocery store. Because you know how they have like milk and quick access items at the front. Vanilla ice cream was at the front. And by the time he got to the chocolate ice cream and got back into his car, it wouldn't start because it would be too cold. So it had to do with heat or something around a specific part in the engine. But really asking why and delving into and finding a root cause analysis from my operations type days of customer support just really helps you understand their perspective and get through that screen. So along with that, can we also do this practice on the wins and the good perspectives and the times where we were right. So not just using this when there's a problem and we're trying to understand, but using this when we were successful and we're still trying to understand. So is it some actual causation piece that we assumed it was to begin with and we were just lucky and successful, or is there something else that we totally missed and hey, this caused a bug over here, but that actually helped somebody else or something like that. So using it in all different kinds of scenarios is incredibly helpful. This was some great epiphany I had, but then that was the whole point of Dave's talk. How we talk matters, specifically when we don't talk at all. So how do we listen better? And I heard at one point that using the ratio of you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so use them in that same ratio. Listen twice as much as you're talking. Not just hearing twice as much as you're talking, but listening. There's also a whole practice and a whole methodology around empathy and customer empathy, so empathetic listening and how do you understand someone else's perspective. So there's definitely a lot that I have to learn there as well. How many of you have heard this term in particular? How might we? One? Okay, a couple. Cool. So we practice this a lot in the build phase. So as a product manager and as a product manager with a development background, I'm always like, yeah, I can do this. Like I can tell you how to do this. This will be great. This will be performant. I understand this problem. But since that's not my role and not my responsibility, I'm not going to be the one that they call at 3 o'clock in the morning when it breaks for some reason. The whole point is when we're with a team of people from all different perspectives, it's not just my perspective that matters when I'm defining the solution. When I'm evaluating the success criteria or the failure criteria of what this solution is. And so we use this phrase, how might we, to build camaraderie with the team, get people to buy in, get people engaged, because that's our end goal of the team. If we have a designer there, as a product manager, I shouldn't be the one dictating design. I should be bringing them to the table and enabling them as a designer. So it's building that trust, dialogue, helping us work to the same goal. So what follows this quote is how might we increase user retention by X% or something like that. So it's specifically around, here's the goal definition, here's the why of what I'm asking, of what I'm bringing to the table, of what we want to build. How do I get all of your input and interactions?
Is that essentially figuring out what the KPI, but how might we insert KPI in there?
Yeah, you can definitely do it that way. Depending on how large your organization is and how specific the problem is, you might have a KPI, or you might use OKRs or a different perspective. It might be, how might we attract more people here if it's a marketing team, if it's a sales team, and how might we increase the convergence of this state of the pipeline. You can use it in all sorts of areas.
Your point is really about
not try to be the smartest person in the room, right? It's the collective intelligence that gets us to a better answer. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Going back, I really like the bike metaphor, so I'm going to steal that and use that from now on.
You don't have to steal it if I give it to you.
Good to go. But like, if there's only one spoke driving that, you're not going to get buy-in. I've worked with several teams that are driven by that one power person and the person who likes to build their castle and then go on vacation occasionally or not go on vacation occasionally. But yeah, it's about having the entire the wealth of the team and how that's more than the summation of individual ends.
I think if anybody's in a leadership position, particularly a younger PM team or in your group, it avoids the hypo problem, highest paid person opinion, for those things where you get stuck with the CEO is a classic model. There's a whole bunch of stories you can look up. There's variations of it, but the CEO walks by one day and says, it's that simple question of like, is there a way we can do X? And the team spends off like 10 days working on something. It's like, no, I really want to just it was just a question, not a go do something. But how might we do something versus like, we should do it this way. But it's like, okay, great. How do I solve your version of the problem versus get to the outcome? It's more of an outcome-based approach than it is a directive-based approach. So it's subtle, but it's really effective in that capacity.
Yeah, I use this too. It's a kind of a clever phrasing that gets buy-in, but it also invites and draws out contributions.
Yeah. And you're asking points of view. It's like, how might we do this? Well, we could do this or this. Okay, great. Now you got divergent thought, which kind of think where you're going. Sorry, but
No, that's good.
Set it up.
It's all of this is intertwined for sure.
Yeah, it sort of gets alignment on the end result. Yeah, kind of drawing people along to how might we accomplish X. All right, so there's already that assumption we're working toward that. Now giving your contributions.
Yeah. And what happens when you do that? You give trust, right? Because somebody listened to me, right? Peter Drucker, the father of modern business, whatever, once said that the right decision can't be achieved without an adequate amount of dissent. Right? So if all you do is say, hey, we're going to do this, you're not going to get the, oh, wow, I never thought about it that way. So how might we is a humble leadership posture that invites people to tell you things that you might not actually know. And I love the HIPPO example.
As a consultant that works not with just startups, but with small, medium businesses, I also use this directly to CEOs all the time, because it allows me to reframe their question or whatever that directive was, because they may be used to operating under that procedure. So as a product manager, as a contributor, I can even use this to initiate a place where I will want to contribute to. So instead of saying, no, you're wrong, this is my perspective, it's saying, okay, so here's the goal. It's setting up that framework, and it's just a really clever phrasing that I'll help you rely on that. That's awesome. Around those same concepts, has anyone heard of diverging and converging? It's used in tons of frameworks. We use Product Design Sprint, which is out of Google Venture Labs. It's in the Double Diamond design process, planning poker development. You guys use that? So this is just the broad concept and the broad wording that I'm giving, again, to build camaraderie in this build stage in particular, but to get to the best converged answer, first you have to diverge and get perspectives and opinions from everyone in the room. So in planning poker, if you're not familiar with that, a deck of cards, everyone has the same hand, and it basically says, it's an estimation technique. So if you have 5 engineers at 5 totally different levels, and they all say, hey, based on what I understand this user story to be right now, I think one person might say, hey, this will take me an hour, and one person might say, hey, this will take 5 hours to do. And so everyone flips over their card at the same time, and then if there's agreement, great, you move on with that agreement. If there's not, you discuss it more, because there's obviously some miscommunication, so it's a great way to see these different perspectives without the HIPPO problem. Really, that'll take you 5 hours? Were you slow? Like, no, we don't want to get there. So, using it in design processes to generate ideas and then to how you do that. So this is more in the discovery phase as well, is what is your convergence technique is different in all these different frameworks, and there are tons of good methodologies out there for different occasions. But the concept is true through all of these is, hey, let's get ideas from all these different perspectives and put them back together. So I go to counseling as well. This has been like the best thing as a business leader for me, is a safe space that you can go and talk to somebody. And my counselor gave me the advice recently that basically said the best way, scientifically proven from his experience, that you can delegate something to someone else is asking them, would you? It's inviting them to take ownership of that. It's the same as the saying, how might we all together, but to delegate to an individual person, it's saying, would you do this? Because it gives them the out at the same time of, oh, I got these other commitments, I got these other things. It's not saying, could you? It's not questioning their abilities or their capabilities. And it allows them to essentially step away if it's misplaced. And it also allows them to come in and take complete ownership of it if it's right on the money or misplaced. So I've been practicing this, and actually the results that I've seen out of this is phenomenal. Just a slight wording change. And again, it's a practice. It's something I have to keep returning to because it's so much faster just to be direct and to not worry about some of the rhetoric or how you're phrasing your words at times. But the results are phenomenal.
Wait, can you try this out?
Would I? Slightly off of that, and this is interesting. So, how many people have started an email saying sorry? How many times do you do that in a day? Like once a day? Yeah. So I always do that, and recently, the past year or so, I've stopped. So I normally type out some kind of fluffy rhetoric to say, like, hey, or some language to soften the blow of whatever I'm delivering. Instead, I found that saying thank you for something is better. So if I was late, and I'm sorry I'm late, or something like that, it doesn't work. It sets you on the back foot immediately. Instead, thank them for their patience. Thank them for what they gave you and what you took from them. And so I'm trying to find more instances of this, but it's been phenomenal to see the kinds of response and the respect that it doesn't demand in return, but it garners in return. Like it just sets the conversation differently. I've noticed this. I think Sheryl Sandberg talks about this in Lean In, which I think everyone should read as well, because it's just a great way to engage and come to the table. So, yeah, any other instances that you've run into that you found apologizing for?
Sorry, I can't think of any.
Funny you mention that, I've read something about that recently too, about, be more effective, stop apologizing for all that stuff. It's really hard in email. Because it's one of those easy phrases, turns of phrase to be like, hey, sorry for this last minute request. Like you say, it's funny, I got to do it this week actually. Well, actually, I constantly didn't do it with my team this week. I got a request passed to me, just like, last minute request, I just drop the words, and some of it's just like you write it and just delete the word and keep it with the rest of your phrase. Like don't say sorry for last minute request, like last minute request, guys, gotta move on this fast. Here's what I need to do. Thanks in advance, appreciate the effort on this one. Like think of what they're gonna contribute to it. And it just changes that way. That way you're not always apologizing, like you don't control or you weren't in control of what the situation was. It removes that. It's like, yeah, I'm in control, but guess what? Sometimes it rolls downhill, sometimes it impacts others. I see that, but I appreciate your effort. So the counterpoint is I haven't picked up on that that's a nice way to kind of counterbalance it, thanking them extra for whatever they did contribute for. Thanks for working late.
Yes, exactly. Like, thanks for that effort. And if you practice mindfulness or meditation in any kind of capacity, the 3 gratitudes every morning of balancing out your day, just gratitudes in general. spirits of not just you, but everyone around you too. So it's awesome.
The one that I cognizant of is, I'm sorry, I'm not tracking, I'm not following, I'm not understanding. And what I've learned is, kind of starting with, kind of along the same lines, thank you for your input. What I'm hearing is X, Y, Z, or if I'm understanding you right, we're going this path. And I find that, one, you feel better in the situation because you don't feel kind of like the dumbest person in the room. But then it's also kind of that inviting feeling where you want them to speak more. So I think it kind of works both ways.
I think in particular when you apologize for something, you're also taking ownership of it. Something you just said reminded me of that. And that, like, especially if you get asked, like, I've received an email at like 9 p.m. and expected a response like the next morning, and it's like, oh, sorry for the delay. Like, no, that's not what we agreed to. That's not the initial expectation we set up. Like, you're paying me for 40 hours of work. Raise my salary, start apologizing or something like that.
So the flip side of that too, though, is if you've done something and you need to say I'm sorry, say I'm sorry. Right? Because if you're the person that never says I'm sorry, what happens to trust? You don't care. You're not a compassionate person, right? So by reducing the amount of times you say I'm sorry when you don't need to, say that louder.
It's more impactful.
It means something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that if you're like, as somebody that also does product and customer success, if your stuff is down, you don't go thanking people for their patience. for their patience, you apologize and thank them for their patience. It's all one way. And that's that.
So I think it goes to what is that expectation? Like when something's down, now from the SRE perspective, if you have a threshold, or if someone's like complaining about something that's outside of that threshold, or I wonder if there's a balance there.
If it's like 5 minutes or something, and you're 99% up, so sorry.
Yeah, but you know what? There's a purple cow in that. If anybody of you are familiar with Seth Godin, there's a purple cow in that, right? A purple cow is that unexpected thing. Like driving down the road and you saw a purple cow. What? Purple cow? Cows aren't purple. Like you can talk about your company's value proposition, and it's a great story that Seth Godin tells. He says, I was tracking a book that got lost, and I called the shipper, and they said, no, right? It says right here on page 3 of the contract. Their value proposition is not we ship your stuff for you, so you don't have to worry about it. It's we're going to fulfill this contract. So you know what? If you have empathy for somebody, even though you don't have to, they're like, wow, this like you don't have to give anything away. You could say, I understand. I'm sorry that we didn't meet your expectations, because that's their expectations. It's a business critical situation for them, right? I'm sorry we didn't meet your expectations. Here's what we're doing about it. Okay, I'm not thrilled, but
I think that's a really good identifier for almost like service market fit. The expectation is not what you are actually offering. So as a consulting company, we offer we call it Protect. It's our service to keep you up and keep the service up and running. And it's all about having someone to call, to be on the phone, to be with you, to be empathetic about you instead of like because the uptime is not what's specific and what matters to them at the end of the day. They don't care about those numbers. So getting that like service market fit specific of, I care about this book being delivered, not this contract and this random piece of paper. That was a tool to get to that. So.
You let your attorney deal with the contract. Like if they send you papers that say we want a discount because you didn't make your SLA, that's when you pull the contract out.
So I think, I don't know, maybe I need to work on this one a little bit more.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
Are you apologizing for that?
Well, thanks for your understanding. How many of you have heard Crucial Conversations, the book? It's awesome. If you haven't, go out and buy it today. It's awesome. I'm not paid by them. We're not affiliated. I am still learning this stuff. It is eye-opening. So a Crucial Conversation is one, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm still learning it. It's one where the stakes are high, there's emotions involved, and
I think something like the outcome is important.
yes, the outcome is important. So without any of those, like if the stakes aren't high or something like that, well, that might be involved with outcome. I don't know. So the point is though that during these conversations, like if someone's getting fired, if you're in a fight with somebody over something that matters to you, there are techniques and ways to handle this. And so the three main takeaways that I have from the book are, the first is getting to a shared meaning of the conversation. So setting up those contexts and those frame of references that the message can be delivered and understood well. So really hard to do in our current political environment, but that's a really good example of, hey, we need a shared meaning before we can actually be successful in these crucial conversations that we're having. The second key component that I found was essentially you need to stay focused. And what that means is whatever your goal is, whatever the outcome is you're looking for, there's going to be tons of distractions and interference and noise of feelings and perspectives that are important to pay attention to and to listen to and to hear. But you and what you bring to the table, the message that you're repeating, needs to stay focused on your end goal. So don't go down rabbit holes. And what are some techniques to do that? This book has a bunch of really good examples for it. And then the third component of crucial conversations that I found incredibly useful is making it safe. And so that's all about receiving that message back, and then the response back to your initial message needs to be a safe environment so that you can still continue to learn and still drive towards that. So there's a ton of more pieces to crucial conversations and a ton of details of how you talk during them, what is your posture, what does your behavior look like, but those are some of the key components of this. Has anyone had success with crucial conversations in their day-to-day that helped a lot?
Oh yeah, I mean that was probably one of the best classes I've ever taken. We brought it on site, and then probably the biggest thing I took away was we tell ourselves stories, so it kind of plays into your filter, your screening things. So when you said no, you're not going to deliver this thing to me. You know, I'm the guy's an idiot. He's an ass. I make up this big story of why you said no, but if I had this crucial conversation with you, you'd say, oh, well, it's 5 p.m. and the vendor's closed. I'll get that information for you Monday. Oh, okay. So, you know, we tell stories about what we think the other person is thinking. And none of those stories are almost ever.
Can I just make a comment? Yeah. So one of the most powerful concepts for me, in addition to everything Dan said, is mutual purpose. Right? That's the core of the crucial conversation. It's always establishing the mutual purpose. Like, look, you and I might not agree on this, but we both have the Bob, the customer, getting back online. Like, we may disagree about how we're going to do that. So now, how might we get Bob back online, right? And it's a fundamental game-changing thing. And then you're able to apply these other things. So the mutual purpose is super critical. And if you think that the story you're telling yourself is this, and you put it out there, and the other person gives you something back, it doesn't match, right? So you haven't achieved mutual purpose until the message that you send and the message they send, you both understand it.
Something I've learned from my sales experience now is to always provide next steps. And I've started doing this in other practices as well. So I do it with development teams, and it's the reverse of an agenda after a meeting. You write up notes and send out those notes. But to be more explicit than that, it brings closure, and it brings that key phrase that people can return to and say, yeah, that was valuable because this was what we got out of it. We generated this next step. And the more explicit you can be with that, the better. So it might not be an actual result. Like, it might not be, hey, your end goal, but it's the next step in the process to get to that end goal. So thinking about that and thinking about how you get there has been incredibly helpful. Just again, in sales, it kind of goes to that concept of always be closing. You don't close a sale by jumping straight to sign here on the dotted line and open up your wallet for me and hand me cash. You jump through it by getting there and getting to agreed upon stages every step of the way. So in product management, specifically around development work, next steps of, okay, our next goal is not, hey, shipped feature. Our next goal is, hey, I want to see, like, what's next? I want to see that specific work that you've done, or I want to get a single test out or something like that, some smaller, more actionable piece. Next steps for me, and like why I'm doing this talk in particular, is we're hiring right now, so you should come check out our website. Finally, showing thanks, kind of getting back to that gratitude piece, instead of saying sorry, say thanks. It's again just that gratitude and appreciation, recognizing and uplifting each other for the work and appreciation. It just brings you closer and builds that trust. So, really appreciate the engagement today. So I'm thankful for this opportunity. That's it.
Can I add one thing to your diverge and converge thing? How many of you guys know who Jeff Patton is? One person? 2 people? All right, so it's a really useful tool, and when Dan and I were talking about sharing this time together, originally we were kind of bantering around about whether or not we do some product management war story kind of things, and maybe there'll be an opportunity to do that in the future. I'm glad one of the guys I invited isn't here, because then I can use it as an example. He's a product owner.
This is being recorded.
He's a product owner. He's cool. He laughs at this story, but it would just be more awkward if he was actually. He's a great guy. He was a product owner on a project that we were working on, and he basically said, hey, look, this is just Gmail. Everybody uses Gmail, right? It's super easy, it's simple, and we all know from product management experience that simple is hard. It takes a long time to do simple. And so we were like, look, we really need to get a team together who understands this. And so we called an expensive meeting. 3 of us from our consulting firm and some people from the client, and they had to fly in from out of town. We had 8 people in the room. And we said, we're going to do this thing called user story mapping. And if you're not familiar with user story mapping and you're in product management, you need to fix that, because it's a really powerful construct. And basically, it's the process of bringing the people in the room who are, this divergent thinking, right? We need the perspectives of everybody, not just the highest paid person. And so what you do is you say, hey, okay, well, we're assuming that we're going to do this thing that's as simple as Gmail. Okay, so who are the people, the actors, right? And what do we expect them to do? And he has a process for eliciting that information in a one-off thing and then deduping all of it. It's a really great thing. And by the end of the thing, like when the guy started out, he's like, fine, to his great credit, he said, look, we'll do it. And at the end, he turned to his number 2 guy and he said, next time you're bringing the Post-its. So he went from, this is ridiculous, just do this, to, wow, how did we ever do this in this other way? So I highly recommend that to you as a tool in your product management toolbox for divergent and convergent thinking. If you want more information about it, check out the corporate, let me know.
I should have left time for questions, so does anyone have any questions?
So the previous guy took all your time.
Yeah, I have one. You talk about how Mike, and I think this goes back to whether people are engaged or not, but I often struggle with, I will present something, and I may not say exactly how it might be, but I'll implore either the developers or the stakeholders and ask them, how can we accomplish this? And all I get is crickets. Is it, I need to go back to the fundamental cause and try to figure out how to engage people, or are there any techniques that people can recommend on how to get this conversation beyond just crickets?
So, play a little 5 whys now. Just kidding. Why do you think they're not engaged?
Well, I think it's honestly, I've been at a company that's been around for a while. We've grown, shrunk, and we're basically a core team that survived all of that. So everything we've tried, and we've been burned now twice well over a decade. So I think there's some, I wouldn't say exhaustion, because there are some times I can get them truly engaged and everybody's clicking. But if it's a new topic or something that we've probably talked about 5 times in the last 6 years, it's hard. So
maybe it's just reframing the question. Okay. You know what I mean? Because if they are adults with pain, if they are, it's here we go again. I mean, do maybe in a way that's engaging or fun. Just say, okay, unlimited resource, unlimited people. In a dream world where unicorns and rainbows are happening. Tell me what you and just get the conversation. In other words, it's the car stuck in the mud. Well, once it's out of the mud, once you've got the inertia, then you keep pushing. So get the push, make it fun somehow, redress it so it's like, all right, I know I'm asking the same old question, but how can I make it so it's more engaging?
So the unlimited resource piece, that reminds me just of 10x thinking in general of like blank slate.
Yeah.
Like, it's never going to happen, but
Yeah,
if it could, why not?
But we were making a movie, and now it's just perfect world.
Yeah.
I mean, let's make this.
You do that really well.
Yeah. But the point is that just make it, put a new spin on, it, make it a little fun. Have draw crap. I don't know, just anything just to again, just to get the car, those tires out of that back into the mud. Okay, that's great.
Knowing their perspective, so you might watch this, but I have a sales guy that I'm working with who is incredibly into video games. Like, I'm a gamer, but he is still incredibly into video games. And so when he's tackling a problem, the perspective of how does a game solve this problem? Or how does a gaming company solve this problem? It lightens up a piece of his brain that he just wasn't applying before. A technique that I learned from some product managers at Capital One was, how would Apple solve this, or how would Disney solve this, or how would X company that has this persona or this perspective or design or brand solve this? How would Elon Musk solve this if you follow him and some of the crazy stuff that he's doing? So from that perspective, it can engage people on a different level and kind of like forget the context of where they're currently at and place them in the context.
Yeah, just drop, whatever's worrying about.
Right.
You just spend.
Yeah. I've seen new team members help that again because they're like, oh, you're new and fresh, like you're not crushed yet. Reinvigorate the team, but at the same time, like if parents are going through a divorce, a kid isn't going to help that. Like there are specific times where that's a bad idea, but just reframing the position. I like to. So one of my main taskbars here on Chrome, let's see if I can pull it up real quick, is this dictionary. And it's weird, like, I'm here giving a talk about communication, yet one of my main links is a dictionary. It's called One Look Thesaurus. And as a developer, one of the hardest things in development is naming stuff. It's incredibly difficult because it always changes. It's god awful. But what this thesaurus does is it allows you to type in several phrases and come up with synonyms for all of those words combined. And so, like, if I'm struggling from one perspective, just allowing me to rephrase and be like, oh yeah, that word means something slightly different to me. So how can I frame my own perspective in a slightly different way? It's just giving a different context to it. So.
There's another aspect of it that if you tried these things, you're getting them out of their context and it still isn't working, there's a deeper underlying root. How many of you know who Patrick Lencioni is?
Oh yeah.
Wrote the book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. When you're trying to actively engage the team and it's dead, in the pyramid, and there's actually tools that we can use
to get to the root of this as well. And one cool thing about, one of the reasons why I'm a widely authorized partner is because they have the tool that plugs DISC and 5 behaviors together. So you start to see like, oh, well, nobody ever listens to us because they always tell us that we're just into the weeds, so why bother, right? Now we have an absence of trust, and trust is the fundamental thing that leads to results. And so if we don't have trust, we don't have productive conflict of ideas. Like your leadership team and your development team, you should come out of those things tired because people are like, doggone it, this is what we gotta do. Okay, well tell us why, right? We're having really productive conflict about ideas. Like, we're not gonna do it that way, but I've been hurt, so I'm okay with it. I understand the decision we're making and I'm committed to it. I'm bought in, and the commitment leads to accountability, which leads to results, right? And so I think getting people out of their context and reframing things and doing those things is really important. But if after that you find out like, God, still it didn't work, right? We should talk.
One thing that helps is that change location. Well, while you're doing all this context, actually changing physical location gives them a whole different liberating experience, and then changing context and then try that.
Sorry, you were good.
Well, I was gonna mention, you mentioned kind of that we've tried a couple of things that hasn't worked. I had a development team where I worked previously that, the business, the PM and the business wanted to go a certain way and drive a certain outcome, but it was a product that had like tech that we called it like the hidden bones everywhere. And ultimately we would get to a certain point and the tech debt would rear that we had and we got stuck. So we could never execute 100%. And what we finally said is, you kind of mentioned, you phrased the question in a way of like, well, we have this thing, they seem to try it before, and they're not engaging on that. What we finally stopped was like, okay, Dev, like help us out. What are we missing? Like, where are the bones hidden that we need to go solve? Because obviously we're hitting some barriers, we're not able to achieve the outcome. In this case, it's like, hey, you guys have seen what we've tried. It hasn't worked out. What else can we try? What are we missing? Like, what are you, from your perspective? And that might be a way to say, a way to rephrase the question or get them in think about it in a different way. We actually pivoted a good chunk of our roadmap because ultimately they gave us the commitment actually at one point saying, if you allow us to fix these things, we can deliver more stuff faster because all roads lead through this. We're like, okay. And they were jazzed up because they wanted to go take it on because they hated it. They hated having to work around it and deal with it. And so actually, we listened to them. So that's the way we got them buy-in, saying, okay, you got it, but by the way, aggressive timelines, go jump on it. But they're like, finally, they got excited because it was like hard technical problems that were just nasty. They got fired up again.
And part of that is because now they feel like they defeated. Now they felt like they had some shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't just the cog in the wheel.
Yeah. It gets into different things come out into the relationship between are you throwing something at the wall? Like, it gets like that game overall. Like, are they being heard? Are they a contributor in the process of figuring out what the goal should be or how the goal should be achieved? And so maybe that you're close on that, or the organization's close on that, but you need to back up one level and say, how do I get them to even help us set the goal? And then that's where you get the buy-in still on that piece of it. So probably a couple of different things.
Well, I like what you said too. Underlying current of that is we probably set up for success.
Yeah.
Because part of what you mentioned is kind of ebb and flow of it worked, it didn't work. You might want to offer an idea right now where it may come back to bite you. But I feel like we're in a new environment where we can actually have some type of level of, I don't want to say assured success, but I think that could be a component too.
But isn't that a bigger kind of words too than the culture of failure and the culture of experimentation and learning?
That's a great talk, Dean.
So guaranteed first experimentation.
So on that transition, I'm happy to announce that Dean is our next speaker. And we're going to try something new called product therapy, where we can have a safe space to, and maybe let's just like not record this one. Yeah. We'll think about that.
We'll have like a voice changer. It'll all be like silhouettes. We'll put a filter over the lid.
There you go. You can record it. Just keep it easy there. Me and just the wall. No other faces.
So that's going to be on March 21st at 5:30 p.m. Maybe at Pendo. More details to come soon. Also,
if you have a location, once again, we mentioned before,
things we're looking for. Always looking for good locations. Apologies for those of you that got locked out by the door tonight. Snafu with the building. Other doors were open, that one wasn't, so apologies for that. But locations, here we go. Hey, yeah, look at that. We've done this before. Speakers, sponsors, locations. We're looking for all of those, right? You saw tonight, like, this talk wouldn't have happened with obviously the volunteers, but also what you guys contributed as well, right? And I learned as much in the conversation we just had over the last hour or so. So, you know, take an idea. If you say, hey, I got an idea, I only have probably 20 minutes of content, we'll take it. We can do three 20-minute talks, do conversations that way. We'd love to actually, we may just schedule this one out and do the lightning talks and just have people sign up that night or something like that. The idea of a lightning talk where you go rip on an idea for 5 or 10 minutes and we run through a bunch, right? So
you get involved with something?
Only if you want to, Gene. Gene likes to sing. So we'll do that, but
Product opera.
yeah.
You have Kirby do a modern product manager.
Okay.
It's on your Twitter feed.
No, that was a pirate thing.
Oh, that's right.
So thank you again to the sponsors tonight, User Voice and Vaporware, for helping us put things together, for the food, the location, the video. We appreciate that. Thank you guys for showing up. This is a community. It's up, what excites, I think, Dan and I the most we're talking about tonight is that to start this a little while ago and the different companies that we learn about, and we learn from, other companies are kind of coming in. We love to move this around in the area to make it easier for people to get to. We know, weeknights are hard sometimes, and that's for that. So if you've got ideas of locations or times, or even people in your network that you think would be a great speaker, David, we met in the last couple meetings ago. He's like, through a friend of a friend, acquaintance, right? We pulled in researchers and all different kind of people that are around the product space. So anybody, if you ever want to get one of your dev leads, dev managers to come talk about life on their side, right? Like how to work with the dev team better. Any of that stuff is all relevant, right? This is really about the product space itself. How do we work together? How do we build cool stuff, ship it faster, and enjoy our lives, enjoy the careers that set ourselves up for. So
I think there's still some beers over there, so grab them for the road.
yeah, grab some nuggets, grab the
Hey, beer for the road.
Don't listen.
You were the only one listening.
So thank you guys. Thanks for coming out.